So we're going to split the conversation up into three sections. The first section, we're going to talk a little bit about the platforms, the social media platforms that are appropriate for career search and presenting yourself online. And then we're going to talk about that presence, you know, the do's and don'ts and tricks and traps, as Dana says, of creating your presence in social media. So that'll be the first section. The second section will be all about finding your next employer, finding opportunities. And the third will be about getting found, being found by others, by your next employer or opportunity. So we'll split it up that way and kind of guide the conversation that way the best we can. And I'd like to start off with a question to Kelly to start it off. So what social networks should we be using to help find a job?
I really think your best networks are going to be LinkedIn and Twitter. Dana can speak more to LinkedIn than I can, but Twitter is a really great resource for finding people who work at companies you want to work with and cultivating relationships with those at those companies that can help connect with you to the people who can make hiring decisions. It's really important to build relationships with people, and those relationships are the most important way to not just cold call a company with your resume as you think you do normally, but it's a way to actually establish a relationship with someone, and then when they have a job opening or you're ready to move on to your next job, you can actually contact that person and they'll be more willing to forward your resume or your LinkedIn profile to the person who can connect with or can make that decision to bring you in for an interview.
So Twitter, LinkedIn. Paul, anything to add to that?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go ahead and agree with Kelly. Actually, my last two jobs I got directly through people I met on Twitter, basically, so I can't underscore enough how fantastic Twitter is. I'm actually going to say, though, too, that you might find yourself in a position where you're looking for a job and the employer who you want to work for is particularly active on one network and maybe not another. So go to where your audience is. If you want a job at Google, you should probably spend a lot of time on Google+. I know that that's not an insanely popular social network as it goes, but they're probably going to check that out. Similarly, if you're in a totally different business, maybe they're really active on MySpace or they're really active on some other obscure thing. Figure out where they are and go there. If you're not looking for someone, a specific business or something like that, then yes, I definitely think that Twitter and LinkedIn are big. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think it's pretty important to keep a pretty balanced presence across most of the major social networks, Facebook included. Just because you don't want to dig yourself too far into one niche. I feel like that's something that employers look at too to make sure you've got a well-rounded presence.
So, Dana, how does LinkedIn fit into all this?
Yeah, the latest statistics show that where the managers are, the hiring managers expect conversations is LinkedIn by far today. That is changing as Twitter's really coming up fast and furious, but in order, it's LinkedIn, Facebook, and then Twitter in terms of presence of managers, and especially with LinkedIn discussion groups. So you can join the groups, you can join Microsoft employees, you can join any of your target companies and join in on the conversation there and have a much richer conversation. You can also learn to do so much research. So I recommend on all three, definitely, but in my order is LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And take their tutorials or find free information on how to use each one for job search. It's amazing the amount of functionality that very few are using where they think they're great on LinkedIn, not for job search. So learn the incredible tools.
So are there any other platforms that we need to be concerned about, or really those the four? I've heard LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google+.
The one thing I would add is make sure you also, if you're looking for your first job, this is how I landed that job at that startup teaching lawyers how to blog, is having a blog of my own that I was able to establish myself as an expert. If you don't have if your background doesn't fit with the job you want, or you don't have that 2 years of experience that you can't get without 2 years of experience, which is the chicken or the egg, having a blog that shows you know what you're talking about is a great way to establish expertise in a topic that can substitute for that missing experience that a potential employer would really love. So having a blog, and on that note, doesn't matter where the blog is hosted. It could be a Tumblr, a WordPress, maybe not a LiveJournal. I don't even know if that still exists. But having a blog, and don't worry about what it looks like. Just write about what you know. And when you send in your resume or you use LinkedIn, make sure you link to that blog, and make sure you keep it professional. And that'll help you stand out in the crowd.
So is there a benefit from separating my personal presence on social media from my professional? And how do I do that if that's the right thing to do, Paul?
To a degree, yeah. I think that, Twitter is basically a completely open network, right? Your profile's either private or it's public. It's, all your tweets are out there. So I think that's one of those where things kind of weirdly blur together. There's always going to be a cross of personal and professional, and that's okay. On the other hand, Facebook and Google Plus too are networks where you can pretty finely tune which updates go to which groups of people, or which updates can be seen by which groups of people. That's a situation where, like Dana was mentioning, you're going to want to dive into those tutorials if you don't already know how to take advantage of those types of privacy settings. Really learn how those work so you know what groups you're sharing with and how your information can be distributed. That said, I operate off the assumption that anything I post online will end up as public information at some point. There have just been way too many accidents and whoops, I posted from the wrong account, or I didn't filter this the right way or that the right way. So basically act at all times as if every single person on earth, including the people who you want to work for and your grandmother, are going to see these posts, and be okay with what that content says.
So jogging with a beer and videotaping it and putting it on my profile is probably not a good idea.
My grandma taught me to do that, so I would be okay with that.
Well, right then. It could be potentially a problem. Yeah.
Yes.
Beware of that. Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know how far back they can go, as far as your postings.
So it's hard to change anything from far back, and an employer can go quite far back. So let's talk about Facebook just for a brief moment. Yes, Facebook just introduced some new tools that enable you to even more fine-tune, see if I can say this correctly grammatically, but to fine-tune your social circle and really lock that down and actually unfriend a whole bunch of people for the risk of what you just mentioned. Because employers are known to have been known to pull back offers. Let's get right to the job search. They are going to go to social media, specifically Facebook, and look for reasons not to hire you, because they have so many candidates. They're trying to get more into that no pile and whittle down that yes pile. And even after an offer, when they're in due diligence, they may go to Facebook, party pictures, and it's not that only your security settings, but they'll go to some friends. And they're not hunting too much. Don't think there are teams of people doing this, but they're fluent in it to do it very quickly and assess who you are as a future employee, and will you be too vocal on religious, political, etc. A liability for some reason. So I'm just being really straight from the companies. It's getting more and more visible, so you need to be more and more careful with everything going forward.
Yeah. So thank you for joining the conversation. I prefer if you could ask the questions in writing, or save them until after, so we can kind of keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our profiles. Okay, our presence, our professional presence online. And let's kind of focus on LinkedIn, because that seems to be, that's the one that's best suited for creating, let's call it your resume. Actually, what I like to call it is that your profile on LinkedIn is your professional narrative. So it's a way to tell the story or to start the story to then carry over into conversation about your career and the things that have impacted your successes in career. So think of it as not only your professional narrative, but a professional success narrative. So what are the things that you've been successful at? What are the things that help you really demonstrate to your potential employers that you have something to contribute to the organization? Because they don't hire you just because they've got a bunch of money set aside and they want to drop the unemployment numbers. It's a contract between the employer and the employee. Employer gives you money, and in return, you add value to the organization. What is that value you're going to bring? And the way to bring that about is to kind of tell the story of how you've done it for others. Okay? So with that, let's talk a little bit about the profile and the depth of information that you should have, and maybe some of the don'ts. Danny, you want to start us off on that one?
Absolutely. So first of all, most hiring managers today are still not going to LinkedIn for your resume. They still want you to apply. You must apply. When someone sends me a link and says, here's my resume, and it's LinkedIn, sorry, follow our procedures, attach it. So it's not your only place for your resume and your background. First of all, it needs to be 100%. So again, tutorials, and get that metric to 100%. But even I've seen 100% profiles that are just so light. They just barely filled it in, and that shows. Thirdly, so I've talked about, so first of all, let me start with, it's not the only place. Secondly, it needs to be at 100%. Third, you need to have it accurate and matching your resume. So yes, you can add to it features, brand stuff, more embellishment in a very accurate way, but you must match your resume. Don't have differences with what's on here and what's on LinkedIn. Very important. Don't have a company listed here that's not on LinkedIn, and vice versa. Finally, in the old days, what did we mailed in when I was back in grad school, long time ago, was the trifold resume, cover letter, and reference letters often. Guess what? LinkedIn should be where your references are. And I do not mean those little endorsements where people check off, Deanna's really good at marketing. So what? It's the references that are embedded in your company background or your experiences while you're a student. Ask people to write nice references. You can go to my LinkedIn profile and see the difference between an endorsement and references. But yes, your presence, if you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist. Let's be clear. And then you should be 100% and grammatically accurate. You're sampling, you're writing.
Great. Kelly, do you have anything to add?
I think to add to that is beyond your profile, it's really important to make sure you're connected to the people that you want to be looking for jobs with, if that makes any sense. So how many of you already have jobs now? So all of you have colleagues. You should be connected with all of your colleagues on LinkedIn. And by connecting to those colleagues, that ensures that when those colleagues move to other positions, you're going to have connections at lots of other jobs. And when everyone starts job hopping in 2 or 3 years and you're ready to look for a new job, you're going to be able to connect with them. And also your friends are going to be at jobs and they're going to be job hopping. And the more connections you have, the more ability that you can have to connect with those people to help find you that next job. And those first degree connections are really important because you can actually direct message someone on LinkedIn when you're a direct connection, but if you're a secondary connection, you can't directly message them. So it's really important to build out those connections, and every time you establish a new relationship with someone or a new colleague or a new friend, to actually establish that connection on LinkedIn so that when you're ready to look for a new job or you're curious, you can actually message someone that you have a relationship with and say, hey, I saw that you have a job available, or I'm looking, is there something available at your company? And they can actually communicate with you directly without having to go through this weird Craigslist route.
So one of the questions I received, and I'll kind of paraphrase, is, should my profile be broad and generic, or should I narrow it down and be very specific about the niche or the type of profession or career or job that I want? Paul, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. First of all, don't be afraid to update your profiles, even frequently. I can say that as I've kind of moved around and, kind of changed my mind about what I want to be, what I want to do. I mean, I started out as a journalist, as an actual reporter. I moved into managing social media presences, and then, I'm in this kind of social media PR kind of realm right now. I'm not shy about updating my profile. Like if I decide like this is what I want to focus on at this time in my life, career, whatever, I'll update that and I'll be consistent across platforms. As far as being broad versus being specific, I think that's really kind of up to you. Dana might be able to speak a little more eloquently, at least, on the topic of LinkedIn. But I would say that whatever it is that you're looking for, that is what should be reflected in your profile. If there is only one job in the whole world that you want, right, and you don't want to accept anything else, write to that on your profile. Stick to that. If on the other hand you're like, I want to work in PR, then maybe write a little more broadly, but really just tailor it to what you want, what you're looking for, because it's frankly kind of a waste of time to be so broad to just go for any job when in fact there's one specific job that you want.
If I can play out a scenario, so what's happening right now while you're sitting in that chair, there's a hiring manager, recruiter, any member of a company looking for you. And what they're doing is typing in this incredible string at the top of LinkedIn. It's like a science. You can learn it too. But they're doing keyword search, basically, if they're looking for you. They're looking for someone with this background, this education, lives in this zip code area, whatever they want. And it could be someone who worked for IBM somewhere in their career. It doesn't matter. They're putting all that criteria and finding you. So if you want to be found for a specific area, you need to have all those great keywords that you see on their job descriptions embedded throughout your LinkedIn profile. It's kind of a game. If you're building it, you're backing into your profile. If you have a job search goal, so let's come to LinkedIn for job seekers, I hope you have a goal. I hope all of you have an area that you're passionate about, especially in a function. It doesn't have to be an industry that you have to work in, but are you a marketing person? Are you ops? Then that's what, those kinds of words is what you want in your profile to be found. Love the idea of altering your profile. There is a setting, by the way, so all of your LinkedIn connections do not see every time you change a word or go potty. They don't get this blast in their inbox, okay? So set your settings so you can modify those. And a final plug for LinkedIn is you can pay to in-mail anybody. It's just a premium service, so you might want to invest in while you're in job search and then disconnect from that. And I don't pay a dime for LinkedIn. It's free for most of you. But if you want to in-mail any network connection, it's a premium service.
So one of the questions that I get from professionals about LinkedIn is, should I write in first person or third person when I'm creating my profile? And from my point of view, as a referral expert, I teach people how to teach others or inspire others to talk about you. Because the best things said about you are said by others. That's why the recommendations are so powerful. And that's why I believe that writing in the third person is actually more powerful than writing in first person. So get out of the habit of writing, I do this, I did that, instead of saying, just talk about it as though you were kind of an out of body, talking about Barry did this, and then Barry was that, and after this. So, and because then it makes it sound like somebody else is talking about you. Anybody have anything to add about that?
Can I disagree?
Sure.
I love you, Barry, but I just, it's like your resume. We don't send in, again, I'm a hiring manager. You send in a resume. I don't want that written like he did this, he did that, right? So the LinkedIn is used the same way. Now, I would go through your profile and circle the amount of times you say I, me, or my. and cut them in half and cut them in half again. So you want to punch, develop this, research that, wrote that. Your power verbs need to pop on what you did. The recommendations are where that's in third party, but I do recommend talking about your passions, who you are, what you're looking for. If you're in job seeking mode, boy, that first sentence should be seeking an opportunity in. Punch me between the eyes, the reader, with what you want to get out of this relationship and this connection. But I'm going to pass on the third party of the whole profile and say first person on those.
Okay, all right. Nick writes from the audience, is it worth adding courses, publications, and slide decks, to LinkedIn profile? Kelly, you want to start that one off?
Absolutely. Actually, LinkedIn just released today a new feature where you can add portfolios. And so absolutely add everything you've done that's a accomplishment in your career, whether that's your academic career or your professional career. The more you can show that demonstrates that you're an expert in what you want to do, the more you'll have a chance at getting that job you want. So utilize LinkedIn to upload and demonstrate that you've done this, that you know this. And if that's a slideshow, if that's a publication, if that's a link to your work, use those features. Look up on LinkedIn, there's those tutorials. Look up how to do that and make your LinkedIn profile as robust as possible. Dana mentioned that there are companies that aren't using LinkedIn. A lot of the more techie companies do use LinkedIn as a resume. My company personally uses the LinkedIn upload feature where you go to the Craigslist and you actually just click on the button and you apply with LinkedIn. So there is that kind of pendulum swinging a little bit. So even if you don't think that all of your jobs are going to be available to apply with LinkedIn, there are going to be some. And you may even have the opportunity to apply with just a cover letter and a link to your LinkedIn profile. That's how I've gotten a couple of my gigs. So make sure that is as robust as possible, because you also never know who's looking for you. If you're in a lucrative career, I know in my company we hire a lot of engineers and they're all headhunted. You never know who's looking for you. So make sure that all of your social media profiles, I know we're talking about LinkedIn right now, but make sure that is complete and you have everything on there that you want, because you never know who might be looking for you and is looking there for you.
My little danger signs are going off. Sorry, I just have to watch out on the LinkedIn. Anything that you post must not be proprietary to the company that you work for. You will be busted for that. Copyright infringement, anything. Be sure it's your own work. We've had people submit samples of their work, and then when you kind of scratch the surface and say, did you do this by yourself? The answer is, well, no, I was on a team of 10 people. So really be sure that you're posting, honoring your prior company's legal parameters.
Wow, I would have never thunk. So let's shift now, and if we have time, or if it swings around and we have some issues that come up with specific about the profile and your presence, we'll work those in. But let's talk a little bit about being found, or finding. So I want to find work now. I want to find a job. I want to find an employer. I want to find what I'm looking for out there in social media, and I immediately think LinkedIn, because that's where I operate, and I'm on LinkedIn every day. Actually, several times a day. I've got it open all the time, and I'm interacting with business professionals all the time. So that's just kind of my world. Paul, what suggestions do you have for actually, starting a search, or maybe it's even turning a conversation that you're having online and turning that into asking for an opportunity or an introduction or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer that kind of in two parts. First of all, with the sort of starting a search. So ideally, when you do go to look for a job, you've been networking online for a while, so you have a network that you can specifically reach out to, or maybe you have a few specific people in mind. If you don't, that's okay. The second tier would be to look for people in your network who know people like that. And then I think kind of the third tier, and this goes back to what we were discussing earlier about, you know, how LinkedIn and Twitter are kind of your prime spots for job searching. Both of those social networks, and obviously feel free to disagree with me, guys, but I think that arguably Twitter probably has one of the strongest search, what do I want to say, I guess search tools out of any of the social networks. Simply because you can type in, you know, strings of phrases, you can type in a single hashtag, you can narrow it down by geolocation. It is a really, really robust search platform, search.twitter.com. Click on the, actually when you go there, they've got a little link that says Twitter search operators. Pop that open. It will absolutely blow your mind how much stuff you can do with Twitter search to narrow down what it is you're looking for. It's really great.
Say that again, it's search.twitter.com.
Search.twitter.com.
Okay.
And then there's a little link below the search box that says search operators. I think some of them are pretty similar to Google search actually, but it's amazing. They work really well. When I worked in news, we used them all the time because we, you know, look for, there's a fire down in Georgetown or something like that. So you'd type in the zip code and say, show me fire near here, and it would, you know, pop it up. Well, apply that to a job search, right? You live in Seattle, you're looking for a job near whatever zip code we're in right now, or you can even just type in the name of the city and then type in a few keywords related to your job search. That'll start to pop up, you know, some results basically. A lot of people, you know, like I know my company, we've hired multiple times since I came on board. You know, a lot of times we don't necessarily post on traditional job boards and things like that, but it's always on our website, it's always on Twitter, it's always on Facebook. So that's the kind of stuff you can search for. And Barry, I'm sorry, what was there was another part to your question that I was going to jump on, and then I kind of went down a rabbit hole. I think you asked something about.
Turning the conversation.
Yes, thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
Turning the conversation. This is actually, I think, a hugely misunderstood and misused part of social media. I think where a lot of people kind of go wrong with job searching on social media is in the sense that you know, they kind of go out there and just sort of walk up to somebody on Twitter and say, hey, you work for so-and-so, are you hiring? Because I'm looking for a job right now, and yada, yada, yada. Really seriously, when you are out on Twitter, here's a great way to think about it. You've been to networking events before or you're at a bar, you're in a room, there's a bunch of people talking and having conversations. That's Twitter, that's LinkedIn, that's social media. Just like you wouldn't walk right up to somebody and ask them for a job before even introducing yourself and making some small talk, you wouldn't do that in real life. Don't do that on social media either. You need to establish relationships before you start making asks, because that is when you actually go to make the ask, that person is going to know you. They're going to understand that you guys have a relationship, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to make that request. As far as when to do that, be a good judge of it. You know what I mean? Read the room. And know when it's okay to do that.
Kelly?
I would add that if you know what you want to do, make a list of target companies, whether it's 10, 20, 100, and actually literally make a list. Make a list on Twitter, make lists on Facebook that you can actually do that. If you don't know how, look it up. There are tutorials for that. And follow those companies. And follow those companies, not only the actual official Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, but look at the social media person. That person is the liaison between the company and the people who make decisions, and connect with them. As Paul said, those relationships are paramount. And develop those relationships and have conversations with the companies as you are looking for a job, and as you establish those relationships with the company, you'll have a much better opportunity when you make the ask. But it's not just randomly going out there and just talking to every single company on Twitter. That's not going to help you. Key in on who you want to work for, whether that's a startup, a specific startup, whether it's Microsoft, a division of Microsoft, but key in on those and build those relationships so that you'll have a better chance of actually getting in the door. the thing with the job search, like with any resume, is getting in the door. What you do in there is not something social media can help you with, but getting to that point is what you need to do. And having those relationships with key companies are what's really important. So use the functions of social media, the Twitter lists, and really understand how Twitter works and how Facebook works to have those conversations and keep the ball rolling.
So, so I'm out there, I'm searching, I'm having conversations with people on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm participating in group conversations, but I'm employed, and I don't want my boss to know that I'm looking for another job. What do I do? How do I keep my anonymity, or how do I protect my current status and current relationship and continue my search? Dana, you got some thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of articles out there, some on my blog, but also elsewhere on the how to secretly job search on using social media. A lot of settings that you need to learn, etc. But you do need to be careful with what you say and how you say it. You may want to tee up phone calls to build a relationship on Twitter, and then say, hey, can I call you next Monday at 3? I'd like to have a conversation with you. So yes, be careful, especially Twitter, wide open. On Facebook, you want to you don't want to do that from your Facebook page. Maybe you set up a separate fan page on Facebook for some of your professional conversations. And especially around work, you don't want to use your company assets at any time, and you don't want to do this during business hours. We've had people just down the hall, we see guys just tweeting and blogging during business hours, and it shows, and then the boss is here, and it's just not good, not smart. Use your own PC, and but the secret job search does have some tips and tricks that are quite lengthy, so no time here to go deeply into it, but it can be done. I just want to comment also, I love all the insights here on research. It's the most deplorable state right now. Candidates are coming in just not knowing, what does OEM stand for in Microsoft? Are you kidding? You didn't look it up. So with all the amazing amount of information on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and then still not doing very disciplined research, guys. So write stuff down or cut and paste it into a OneNote, an Evernote, collect this information in a very structured way so you can use it as time is going on. Don't rely on your brain of reading some tweets and saying, okay, I got that. So please raise the bar on what you're doing is research, finding hiring managers. You can find the hiring manager of the job that you want to apply to if you're really structured and work on it for hours. Find networking events. You want to get out and do face-to-face networking too. Find those on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Well, Kirkland Networking, and boom, you're going to see that every Thursday there's something great to go to where hiring companies are. So blend social media, please, with your face-to-face relationship building in your local area and your companies that are hiring. Love the list idea. I have lists of lists. So definitely get in the habit of writing listing out electronically.
So speaking of networking and using social media, so LinkedIn especially, there are literally thousands of groups that you can participate in. Many of them have face-to-face meetings. In this area, the largest one is Seattle, Linked Seattle, and there's 43, almost 44,000 members. And then they have a monthly networking meeting. In fact, it's tomorrow in Bellevue. They have once a month. There's one in the North End, in Linwood, one in Tacoma, one in Auburn. I mean, there are all kinds of these types of groups that you can find on social media. Meetup.com is another one. Seattle Entrepreneurs is a group that has a meetup site that if you're interested in working for a startup company, you can find groups there to socialize with and get to know online. Any other suggestions? Kelly, do you have any spots or thoughts on that?
Honestly, Eventbrite is a really good site to, I call troll. Just go on there and look for events in Seattle. Let's see which ones strike your fancy. And a lot of them are free. I've held many events using Eventbrite, and I can't tell you how many people walk up to an event that was free and saying, hey, I just saw your event on Eventbrite. I thought it was cool. And they're not even in the tech industry. They just thought it would be a cool thing to go and meet people at. So you can just look for events in Seattle and just show up, or if it's $5, buy a ticket, and it'll be well worth it. And honestly, it's a great way to get a free drink and free food for the evening, if anything.
Well, So how many of you have actually searched on Eventbrite for events? Oh, good for you. You know, that thought never crossed my mind to do that. Every time I have I attend an event and about Eventbrite, it's always being fed to me as a link from somebody else, and as a tool to collect money and get directions on where it is. But I had never thought about to actually use that as a search tool. What a great idea. Any other comments on search? I have another question, but I want how to use it and other sites.
I'll actually just throw in one little trick on searching for events. I've used the Eventbrite and everything. Those searches will work great, but if you go to Twitter, type in P.M or like PM or something like that. A lot of time people list events and there's always they always put the time in there. Search that on Twitter near your area and it'll pop up a whole bunch of stuff that may or may not be listed on Eventbrite and all the other things. It's a cool little hack. You'll find some things.
I love it.
You're a party guy, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, not anymore, no.
Yeah. Notice he didn't use AM. He
Yeah.
used PM. And I would have used AM, but okay. Yeah. All right. So, how important, or what are some clever ways that we can use keywords for search? I mean, one of the things I teach, whether you're searching or wanting to be found, is to create your own list of keywords. That's your unique. It's your unique list of ingredients that really speak to who you are, what you do, and what you're really good at, what you want to be known for. So if you've got 10, 20, 50 keyword phrases, and think about phrases, not words. Keywords is a misnomer. Phrases, 2 or 3 word phrases. What are those phrases that describe you, and where should they be in their profiles to be found, but how can they use them to actually find their next employer? Anna, you're
Great.
nodding.
Yes, absolutely. First, so many candidates are saying, okay, what should my keywords be? And back into it again is, what do you want to go do? Go to Monster Indeed. I don't care where these jobs are even located. Pull down thousands, let me be real, 20 to 30 job descriptions. What keywords are hiring managers using today? Don't say you want to go do biz dev when in fact most companies call it sales or alliance building. So to pick the keywords, if you're looking for a job, pick keywords that are relevant to hiring managers. This isn't about you. This is about them, because you want to be found. So back into your keywords, no different than you're backing into what you should put on your resume, so it's relevant to the audience, not just because it's cool to you. So that's my recommendation, is embed those keywords into your dialogue. Make them natural. There's nothing worse for many of us from getting a resume, literally a resume or on LinkedIn, and just keywords. And there's just a vomit of keywords, that's just meaningless. It looks like you're forcing it. So to make them more natural, put those key statements in. We will find them by typing that string at the very top, and you will fall out of my search for those kinds of skills. So
let me
make them relevant.
There's 2 places on your LinkedIn profile that you can actually
Can put keywords.
list your keyword phrases.
Yeah.
One is in the specialties space, which is usually in the default setting, it's right below your summary. And make sure you separate them by the comma, not by a pipe or semicolon or anything. Computers and the bots, the search bots, they read commas. Comma means separation between phrases. So always use a comma. The next place is the endorsements. So the endorsements and being endorsed for those keyword phrases, or those skills and experiences that you have that are relevant, you can manage those and you can ask people to endorse you for those, but manage it. Don't let LinkedIn manage it for you, or don't let your connections manage it for you and just arbitrarily endorse you for underwater knitting, because that's something you did once in college when you were drunk. But just make sure that it's something that's really relevant to you and part of your ingredients list to your unique recipe. So any other comments on keywords?
I would taking it from LinkedIn to Twitter, because some companies are using Twitter to find their next employee. Most are using LinkedIn, but some startups are using Twitter, and people are using Twitter to network. So it's also important to think about keywords on Twitter. So you only have a few characters for your profile on Twitter. So making sure you have those keywords on Twitter is almost more important than having them on LinkedIn, because you have such limited real estate on there. So you think about the job you have now, you have a specific title. The great thing is you don't necessarily need to use that title on Twitter. You can get creative, and so my title is Digital Communications Strategist. I could simply put blogger, and people who are looking for a blogger at their company are not going to be searching for my title. It's kind of fluffy, let's be honest. But if they're looking for a blogger or a social media strategist, or probably just those two things, but also maybe writer. I have my official titles because that works for me, but making sure that you have the keyword that your next employer is looking for on Twitter is fine. If your employer really cracks down on you and says, I want you to use your official title, well, you're gonna have to do that. But you also have more room to put, I'm a digital communication strategist, blogging enthusiast. So I can put that keyword in there and the title. You have the space. And on that note, you also have space in the profile to put links. So you can have a link to your LinkedIn profile on your Twitter profile, and you also have room for more than one link. There's your official link from your Twitter bio, but in where you have your the actual bio that you write out, you can put a link in there too. So be sure you use that space to offer as much information as possible. But as far as keywords, you don't have to use the title that you have now. You can get creative with words so that people can find you for what they're looking for. And a great trick is to look for what other employers are looking for.
Right on. So let's make that last shift to the third section, and let's talk about being found. I mean, one of the greatest things that we can feel is to be headhunted. Have somebody come to you and say, "Hey, I've heard about you. I want to hire you." So in my world, I'm chronically unemployed. I'm a solopreneur. I'm a consultant. I consult on referral marketing. And so I teach referrals, and ultimately what that is, I'm teaching people how to talk about me so that they will find my next job, and that client or prospect will come to me and say, "Hey, I hear you do what I really need. How could how could we work together?" So, or I want to hire you. So the same thing holds true with employers, and so finding ways to start the conversation about you, or have others talking about you, and being seen and heard and demonstrating your credibility and your capabilities is really important. I think one of the good ways to do that is through LinkedIn groups. So Dana, talk a little bit about groups, or get the conversation going about how you do that to demonstrate your credibility, and actually you can probably do that without letting the boss know that you're looking for a job.
Yes, LinkedIn discussion groups are the closest thing to face-to-face networking, as if you're in front of a group of people who are standing there working for Boeing, let's say, but they're online. And they are there because they want to hear from you. Their assignment, if you will, as an employee is to engage with you. And you can ask questions. Can you tell me about the culture? Can you tell me what this stands for? Can someone tell me the hiring manager of position 1, 2, 3, 4, and see if someone responds? There's no downside. So participate in the groups. You can have an opinion, watch being too controversial, of course, and because you're forming first impressions to people. And your hiring manager could be on that same group. So just look for LinkedIn discussion groups. It's amazing how many there are. There are alumni groups you can join. Microsoft alumni, you can go there and ask them questions, and they'll answer anything because they're no longer working for the company.
Industry specific.
Industry,
role
sales,
specific.
marketing.
Yeah.
There are anything. Left-handed guitarists, they have a good discussion group. So you can find amazing discussion groups. I'll come back up to totally agree, Barry, I believe in 5 years, companies are not going to be inviting resumes. They're just going to be pulling them in from social media by using keyword searches. So as Neanderthal as I've come from, I know the future is going to completely swing away from traditional applying. You're not going to be asked to apply. They're just going to say, no, we're going to go out and grab the people we want. So you want to be prepared for that with a great profile, those keywords, redo your resume, just reboot your job search effort to focus on them and get away from making this all about things you want to say. So there's a huge paradigm shift coming. Now, they'll still post jobs just to get the check mark legally. So if you see a job posting, those aren't all open for all of us. They've already hired the person internally, or they're looking on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook for the right person, and they're just pulling that person in.
So let me do a quick poll. Did you ever, the best job that you've had, did you get it from applying, or did you find out or from a job board? Did you find out about the job from somebody you knew? Did you find it on the job board or find it from somebody you knew?
That's my current job, actually. My boss now tracked me down on Twitter like 5 years ago. And then we just sort of maintained a relationship on Twitter, and that's why I work there now.
Wow. Kelly, any?
Best job I've had is my current job, and it stemmed out of a contract that I got from a word of mouth referral.
So it's who you know, not what
It's who you know. It's both who you know and what you know. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But it's like I said earlier, it's those relationships, and that person that I know, I met. He was actually three years prior. He had hired me at that job that taught lawyers how to blog, but we had stayed connected via social media, and he had gotten hired in the position that he was leaving, and he recommended I take it over. And so that's how that happened.
Yeah, even internally, you know, for me, a career almost 20 years at United Parcel Service, some of the best positions I got was because of the relationships I built internally, and got to move to do something else because I showed some interest, showed some understanding and acumen and passion around that, and sure enough, I got to do some pretty incredible things because of that. So, you know, it really is a good balance of who you know, when you know them, how you know them, and what you know and what your experience is and how well it fits with what you do. So in relation to, so groups on LinkedIn are one way. So Kelly, talk a little bit about how we can use blogs to demonstrate our capabilities and credibility, even if we don't have a blog.
So one way you can do that is by sharing. And this is where Twitter really comes in. I think Twitter is an incredibly valuable tool. When I first started using Twitter, I had no followers, as you do when you start with Twitter. You have nobody. I now have almost 9,000 followers, and I did that by sharing information that established that I was aware of what was going on in the industries that I was interested in, which is social media, technology, emerging media, etc. And as much as I shared my own stuff, as much as I promoted my own material, for every one thing I shared, I try to share 5, 6, 10 things. I try to share at least way more, at least, than I share of my own stuff. And I share interesting articles about what's going on in social media, interesting trends in tech, and by sharing other people's blog posts, that implies and it tells people that I'm aware of what's going on and establish my own expertise and credibility, because it shows I'm aware of what's going on in the industry and that I'm always learning, and it also shows that I'm not self-involved. So, I mean, there's no rule of thumb as far as how many things you share of your own stuff versus how many things you share of others. Some people say it's for every one thing you should share 3, some say 10, but just try to share more of others and make sure you try to stay on trend. So if you are an interior designer and you're trying to launch your own business, or you're trying to get into the industry and join a company, you may have your own blog, that's fine, or you may not, but you'll definitely want to be sharing news or trends or interesting designs or who did what in the industry, and to show that you're aware of what's going on around you, so that potential employer will know that you actually know what's going on and you're going to be a valuable resource because you have those resources behind you.
So we got just a couple minutes left, and I want to give each of you, like 90 seconds to just kind of some last parting shots. Last things that you want people to take away. Let's start with Dana this time. Dana?
You bet. I'll close on one of the last topics too, in terms of how to get a job. The majority are referrals, and they could be in employees, any employee inside a company, and I speak mostly for medium to large. They have an employee referrals program, actually motivate their employees to submit friends. So definitely use that, but it's not an either or. If you are applying for a job, you must apply to their online system. That's how you get into the company's application tracking system and get into HR and recruiting. You've got to get a number. So you've got to do both. Please don't think, oh, I'm going to just network my way into that company and I'm not going to apply to jobs. Okay, so please do both. I'd just like to close with this pendulum that I started with of the concern of all social media, and then, I am not networking face to face. That is by far the most valuable. People want to touch you, they want to see you, they want to smile, they want to see your smile, they want to feel your handshake, and they remember you a lot longer than a lot of noise on social media. So I want to remind you, please, to look for those events. We want to help you tonight with a gift. The great resource, if some of you said to me earlier when I was walking around, is I don't know which companies I want to work for. I don't know who's here. I'm new to the area. I just graduated. So a great resource, also online, is the Puget Sound Business Journal. Amazing resource for who's who in the zoo, people on the move, companies that are growing, startups that are doing great and hiring. You're going to read that in the moment online on the Puget Sound Business Journal. So we have coupons for 5 free issues. Absolutely no strings attached. They're not going to bill you afterwards. And another resource that they have is this book of lists. It's online as well, but I have the old, but you can see it. I brought it with me because I'll be at the reception. So if you just want to work in manufacturing, who are the top 50 manufacturers in Seattle? Who are the top design firms in Seattle? So that's the lists of all the companies here, and it gives you names of the presidents and everything to job search with. So we're going to give you these certificates and talk about all these resources for you. So get out 2 times a month at least, set a goal, go out, meet people.
Great, thanks, Dana. Kelly?
I'm gonna actually just follow up on the meet people. Make sure when you meet people, you connect with them on LinkedIn, you follow them on Twitter. Every single person. I know this sounds like a lot of work, and it can be, but collect those business cards. If you don't have a business card, if someone else doesn't, get out your phone, follow them on Twitter right there. I can't tell you how many times I've done that, and that has led to when I was freelancing, another gig, or it's led to an opportunity when I didn't need it, but it was there. Make sure you connect with people. Use those functions on social media to maintain those relationships. Lists on Twitter are going to be your best friend. You can segment people who might be potential employer, potential liaison, just friends, whatever else. Make sure you follow, and then use social media tools like TweetDeck, Hootsuite to follow up on those lists. If you don't know what those are, Google them. They're great. But use lists to help keep track of people that you want to stay connected with. And make sure on LinkedIn you also connect with them so that when you need their help, they'll be there.
Great. Kelly? Paul?
I'm actually going to steer a little more toward the personal aspect of it. We've talked a lot tonight about how to look good for potential employers, how to find them, how to appear really professional and everything. I'm actually going to say, do not underestimate and don't ignore the personal factor involved in your job search. In other words, you don't want to go out there and get stuck trying to look so good that you end up pretending to be something that you're not really. You want to work at a place where you fit, and you want to work for somebody who thinks that you fit in there too. And if you present yourself as this sort of, kind of stiff, cardboard, optimized, specifically for this position, it'll get you hired, but sooner or later, you're going to realize, and the employer is going to realize, if you don't fit in there. It'll be blatantly obvious. So when you're out there using social media, keep in mind, and I mentioned this earlier, that when you talk to people in person, you're injecting bits of your personality in there, right? Now, granted, it's probably an adjusted version of who you really are, right? Like, how I'm talking up here on stage probably isn't necessarily exactly how I would talk if I was, out at dinner with friends or something like that.
Really?
Or hanging out. I can get on these topics pretty easily, and it bores everybody to death. So I try to save it for when I'm in these situations. But definitely inject your personality and who you are into your online presence. It's your online presence. You should own it. And it will definitely save you the pain of getting into a job and realizing, gosh, I don't fit here. What do I do now?
So in other words, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. I mean, it's so true. I mean, really, I mean, the unique thing that you bring to the market, to the workforce, is you. So find a way to create your unique recipe and your success narrative, your professional success narrative online, and put it out there. Start talking about it. Build relationships with the people that can introduce you, because everyone in this room, everyone you meet and know online is a potential referral source to your next job. They may not be, they're not your mother, they're not your customer, they're a referral source to get you in contact with them. So build that, leverage that, use the tools of social media, and you will be successful. Now, if we didn't get to your question, if there's another topic that you'd like us to talk about, Dana, Kelly, and Paul, and myself will all be at the reception afterwards, and we'll be here for a couple minutes for those of you that are not going to the reception. So please, make sure if you've got a burning question and you want it answered, come talk to us. We're happy to share our information with you. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Susan Terry. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry. Thank you, Kelly.